So, just as we scientists confidently use metaphors to describe such paradoxes as light being a wave and particle at the same time, let's allow such paradoxes to exist in a biblical account. Then we will keep our minds open, but not as open so our brains will fall out. A crafting of singularity so thoughtfully that the infinitesimal pocket of energy had no other way but to explode into the universe with all finely tuned laws of physics that ultimately led to the emergence of your mind pondering it. Welcome to the channel and with all your mind. Today, we're starting from the very beginning. Literally, we're starting from the beginning of the universe. It is the place in space and time when our curiosity peaks and where math and physics come to a screeching halt. It is also the place where different worldviews collide. But I, as many others, think that science and faith can shake hands and complement each other. I truly believe in the convergence of faith and science when it comes to beginning of the universe specifically. The Bible sets the stage of the fantastic spectacle for the science to examine. As an atheist, you're going to have a visceral reaction to this approach. Obviously, you want to completely separate reasoning from biblical account of the beginning of the universe. And this approach has solid basis. We all agree that the Bible is not a textbook for physics or math, and it cannot undermine our research. So why we scientists are so violently opposed to be inspired by the biblical account? The Bible is not going to destroy our research results, but it can inspire us for the future research. And by inspiration, our minds can be more open and sensitive to things we may not pick up otherwise. Speaking of missed inspirations, you do realize that the beginning of the universe and Big Bang was described only in the early 20th century, and it was proposed by French scientist Lemaitre. Before that, for almost 2,000 years or more than 2,000 years, it was widely accepted that the universe has no beginning, that's been ever existing. That only changed after science corrected itself. But the Genesis account tells the beginning of the universe. Maybe, if scientists took inspiration from Genesis a little bit earlier, who knows? We could be space-faring species by now. But as an atheistic naturalist, you want to draw a thick line, and you want to keep on this side self-explanatory world, pure science, proven by observations, analysis, and examination. And on this side, you want to keep separate this big, thick book about philosophy, miracles, fairy tales, imaginary friends, you name it. Even the Galileo said, the Bible shows the way to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. But I assume you are here to explore the convergence of these two sides. I can tell you that it's really difficult to ignore or ridicule the biblical account, which offers some of the most profound insights about the universe and us as human species. And I think we can find the common ground. The Bible literally encourages us to study natural phenomena, to ponder these creations and delight in them. What I'm about to show you is absolutely puzzling. How the book you're making fun of describes laws of nature thousands of years before scientists formally identify them. If you know more plausible explanation for this than divine inspiration, I'd like to hear it in the comments. Let's take a look at some of these. There are a few natural processes that could have been understood by keen observation and an exceptionally bright mind. For example, the description of sea currents and migration of fish and birds. We also read about the earth being transformed by fire, suggesting a molten core, but that could be inferred by observation of volcanic activity. The scripture also mentions that the stars have different apparent magnitudes and light characteristics, which is still observable. However, how about the hydrologic cycle, formally described in the 17th century by French naturalist Bernard Palissy? Here we have it in these words: water is drawn up from the seas, bound, and stored in the clouds for later, and then it is distilled as rain into streams. You could still argue that an exceptionally brilliant observer of yonder could notice water evaporation during hot days and the formation of clouds as a result. But how do you explain the Bible suggesting that the earth is round and covered with a thin protective layer? That is still nothing compared to what the Bible says without a stutter, that the earth is suspended in empty space. And the visible matter is made out of invisible matter, which we know as elementary particles. We also learn about the first law of thermodynamics in the cosmological context. The Bible says that the universe was fully completed in the act of creation, which is nothing else but telling us the amount of energy and matter in the universe is constant. And let's not forget about the second law of thermodynamics, which says that entropy always increases. The Bible clearly says that the celestial objects and earth will wear out and eventually perish. Let's stop here and go back to the beginning. The argument I'm trying to make is, if all those things have been confirmed by science thousands of years later, how much truth it is in the Genesis describing the beginning of the universe. The Big Bang has been proven beyond any doubt, mostly by cosmic microwave background and its polarization caused by gravitational waves. However, a lot of scientists still try to explore alternative possibilities, including multiverses, a universe that goes through eternal cycles of big bangs and collapses. All these efforts to avoid even a hint of supernatural causality and avoiding the paradox of the beginning of time. I think Stephen Hawking hit the nail on the head by saying, many people don't like the idea that the time has a beginning, probably because it smacks of divine intervention. Thus, many researchers will try to prove that the universe is not a derivative of supernatural causation, but it's primary in nature. Then, such a universe can cause itself to be, and we humans are derivatives of such primary naturalistic universe that emerge from multitude of possibilities from the multiverse, and then God can be ignored. Before we dive into official chronology of the universe and try to compare it to Genesis account, there are some important contextual considerations that cannot be ignored. Dr. John Lennox, in his excellent book, The 7 Days That Divided the World, specifically warns about trying to fit the biblical narrative to the current scientific paradigm. Well, first of all, science is always self-correcting, although we believe that we're getting more and more accurate, hopefully. Imagine the Bible were written in the language of 19th century science. We would learn about luminiferous ether, phlogiston. For the contemporaries, it would be an ecstatic discovery, but the language would be embarrassingly outdated now in the 21st century, discrediting biblical account and questioning God's divine insight. On the other hand, imagine the language of the Bible written in 23rd century yet to be discovered physics. It would be completely unintelligible for us, and for the millennia dismissed as gibberish. In this then lies the beauty of Genesis. It is written in a language that's been understood by Moses' contemporaries. It is still understood by a person who knows nothing about astrophysics today, and it will be understood by a layperson born 200 years from now. It was obvious to God that Moses was not ready to hear about singularity, radioactive decay, mutagenesis, and convey that information in a useful way to the next of kin or people in the future. However, if we agree that the Bible describes a spectacle or provides a testimony of what happened without giving details how it happened, what do we make of the details given there? For example, are those little 24-hour days? Or maybe just like a figure of speech, we say, back in my day, kids were well behaved? Or what is heaven versus sky? Why there is light before the sun? Is Genesis factual or chronological? So we must accept that in some instances we are dealing with metaphors, but let's assume some discipline. Just like we scientists have no trouble using metaphors, we do expect them to be close approximation of hard to describe natural phenomena. We have no trouble talking about light waves or particles, fabric of space and time, string theory, protein expression, but we do expect they are close verbal approximations of natural phenomena. So just as we scientists confidently use metaphors to describe such paradoxes as light being a wave and particle at the same time, let's allow such paradoxes to exist in a biblical account. Then we will keep our minds open, but not as open so our brains will fall out. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. I believe here the earth means matter, and heavens means space-time continuum, as we read another word, sky, later. Even today, the word earth can mean the planet or soil. The universe begins with the initial singularity, a point where all space-time, matter, and energy are in a single point, thus formless. Under such extreme conditions, the space-time continuum was so warped that time behaved like an additional spatial dimension. So 4 spatial dimensions could have existed, and no time as we know it today was in existence. A dot in the middle represents the singularity, but remember, there was nothing outside of that dot. There was nothing for the universe to expand into. It is accepted that one fundamental, infinitely strong force existed in infinitely small dimensions. The physics of today's universe did not apply. In our world, everything is caused by something. What could have caused the singularity to appear in the first place? If something was beyond this singularity, it had to be beyond space and time. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. We have here the first testimony that God exists beyond space and time, which flowing water can represent. Later in the Bible, it is mentioned multiple times, but probably most prominently in Psalm 90, verse 2. Before the mountains were born, or you gave birth to the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Now, I suspect you got pretty irritated already listening to this, and will accuse me of using the God of gaps argument. Stuffing supernatural being into something we still don't understand, but surely science will solve it in the future. But consider the initial singularity again. It is very different from other singularities that physics describes, such as black holes. The infinity in mathematics, physics, and philosophy represents an unbounded, limitless, or endless quantity or extent, and it's simply not observable. It's an abstract that we name but we can't examine. It's like an asymptote in geometry, a line that continually approaches a given curve but does not meet it at any finite distance. In fact, scientists hate infinity so much and its prevalence in classical and quantum physics that they created string theory to avoid it, but ended up with living in 10 spatial dimensions. We will never touch infinity, and it's not a matter of building a bigger telescope or larger particle accelerator. It is simply beyond our understanding. Let's assume the universe was suddenly a self-causing singularity of infinitely small dimensions, infinite density, and infinitely high energy with no time as we know existing. That is against all the laws of physics and hard to justify by reason. Perhaps comedian Stephen Wright was onto something, saying that black holes are where God divided by zero, which would surely apply to the initial singularity. So what do we get when we witness something that seems to deny laws of physics and reasoning? I believe we call it a miracle or supernatural intervention. However cringy that sounds to you, it was the case. Wasn't that the very first miracle, a divine causation? A crafting of singularity so thoughtfully that the infinitesimal pocket of energy had no other way but to explode into the universe with all finely tuned laws of physics that ultimately led to the emergence of your mind pondering it. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. The infinite universe then goes through violent expansion, and from the fundamental force emerges the electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and the gravitational force that propelled the world till today. Quarks, hadrons, neutrinos, and leptons emerge, and nucleosynthesis begins. The universe is now hot ionized plasma. When light is born, most of the photons cannot travel too far before colliding with electrons and protons, so the world is foggy. Although there is light, it is impossible to see it. It is trapped in darkness. God saw the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. As the universe cools and particles are recombined to form the first atoms, more photons are released, and the world becomes full of visible light, radio waves, and other electromagnetic radiation. The universe is now pure pale yellow cool light at the temperature of 4000 kelvins. God called the light day. As the universe keeps expanding, it also cools down to 60 kelvins, and the only light sources is atomic decoupling. From that time until the first stars were formed, the universe was truly dark. And the darkness He called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. That time is called appropriately Dark Ages, and lasted until about 1 billion years after the Big Bang. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made a vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it, and it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. The water here may represent the intergalactic gas, the bubbles of ionized hydrogen that were expanding in the process of reionization. First generation stars emerge, and galaxies are formed with an empty space, sky, between them. If perhaps Moses had seen that in his visions, he could have easily identified galaxies as vortexes on water. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place." Within galaxies, around stars, planets form from the dust orbiting those stars as protoplanetary disks. Earth is formed with land, oceans, and atmosphere. And let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters He called seas. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees, on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. Here's the most confusing part of Genesis. Seeds of life and plants emerged before the sun is created the following day. However, we know that Earth was created in the protoplanetary disk of the sun. And God said, "Let there be lights in a vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times, and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. How could this be? We could speculate that the earth, in its primordial form, was enveloped in thick clouds, and neither the sun nor the moon were visible through that layer. A time-traveling observer then tells the story from the planet's surface. The early plant life that could have emerged in the proximity of thermal vents could have been sustained by the weak ambient light reflected from volcanic activity or sifted through the clouds. Note that Genesis uses the word lights, not naming them even once, despite the fact that later in the Bible they are mentioned by their corresponding names. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. So here we are, 13.8 billion years later, both faith and science entertaining us in the most exhilarating inquiry in the human history. Both give us unique, profound insights into how it all began and why it all began. And this is just the beginning of the story. We're going to stop at day 4 because the beginning of life and the emergence of humans will require separate videos. In the next video, we'll stay in the field of astrophysics, exploring the absolutely amazing fine-tuning of the universe to host human life in it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate your support. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.